Hi, I'm Lindsay Kosnick, Senior Wealth Advisor and Portfolio Manager with Team LWC at Canaccord Genuity. Now, one of the most common estate planning challenges I see with families in Canada actually has nothing to do with investments. It's the cottage. So, for many families, right, the cottage is one of the most meaningful assets they own. Okay, it holds decades of memories, family traditions, and emotional value. But from a planning perspective, it can also become one of the most complicated assets to pass on to the next generation. And the reason is that many families simply haven't had the conversation early enough. So, from a tax perspective, right, when someone passes away in Canada, assets like a cottage are generally deemed to be sold at fair market value. So, what that means is there can be a significant capital gain triggered at death, even if the property is never actually sold. However, the tax side is often only part of the issue. More often, the bigger challenge actually comes down to family dynamics. So, when families are thinking about passing down a cottage, there are three questions I always encourage them to consider. First, do all of the children actually want the cottage? Right? Many parents assume the answer is yes, but in reality, children may live in different cities, right? Have different financial priorities or simply different lifestyles. So, what can feel like a treasured family asset to one child can sometimes feel like a financial responsibility or burden to another. Second, can everyone realistically afford the ongoing costs? So, owning a cottage comes with ongoing expenses, property taxes, insurance, maintenance, repairs, right? And over time, these costs can become quite meaningful. So, it's important to think through whether the next generation is both willing and able to take that on. Third, how will the estate be equalized? If one child ultimately receives the cottage, how do you ensure the other children are treated fairly? Right? Often that's going to mean balancing the estate with other assets, whether that's investments, insurance, or other property. So, without planning, this can create tension within families. However, with planning, it can be handled thoughtfully. So, in my experience, the most important step in cottage planning isn't actually the tax strategy, it's the conversation. Families that talk about these decisions early, while parents are still able to guide the process, tend to avoid many of the challenges that can arise later. So, the best estate plans don't just focus on minimizing tax. They focus on preserving family relationships and making sure assets like the cottage continue to be a positive part of the family's legacy. So, if this is something your family hasn't discussed yet, a good starting point is simply sitting down together and working through those three questions I outlined before decisions are ever formalized. These are the types of conversations we spend a lot of time helping families think through, and they're always easier when they happen sooner rather than later.